Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And I thought it would be a good idea to do a video on just focused on how I dehydrate my herbs, how I care for them and all that. I know I have a lot of videos where I talk about it. Usually they're kind of in this and that type videos or videos where I'm doing a bunch of other things. But I do get a couple of repeated questions on the herbs. Now this goes for medicinal herbs, culinary herbs, but how you dehydrate them may depend on the type of herb, how thick it is and how delicate it is, all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go over just a few of the herbs I've got here, a little bit on how I harvest them and how I dehydrate them. So let's go ahead and get started and I'll show you what I have here. Alright, right here is a pretty good bunch of catnip. So we're into the fall now and my herbs are starting to slow down, but I still have quite a few that are doing well. And the catnip is one of them. And as you can see, I left all the flowers on there. And typically what I do is for herbs like mints that grow like this, because catnip is a mint, is I will strip most of the flowers and the leaves right off of each stem. Sometimes on the smaller ones, like this, I'll just leave this stem and worry about it later once it's dry, but most of the time I like to fully strip them. And then if I'm using the electric dehydrator, I just pile them on there. I don't worry about them spread apart real evenly because herbs will dry pretty quickly because most of them are fairly delicate. And for the temperature, I set the temperature at, for me, 105. I recommend never go higher than that when you're talking about your herbs. You can go as low as 95, but what I do is I usually put the more delicate herbs on the bottom because my heat element is from the top with the Nesco dehydrator. And then the ones that take longer to dry, like the Calendula Flowers, I put them on the top rack. And then of course you still want to check it, keep an eye on it, and it usually takes a full day for all of them to dry completely. Some will, like nasturtium leaves, can dry in just a few hours. Now right here is some Feverfew. I actually don't really need to dehydrate any more Feverfew, but I went ahead and picked some because I wanted to show you that I do also dehydrate the flowers. Mostly I use the leaves and I usually harvest them before they're flowering, but if I decide I want some more, I don't mind picking the flowers and throwing them in there too and dehydrating it up and mixing it all together. Besides, I always like throwing a little bit of flour in with my herbs when I'm dehydrating because it just like with the catnip, it just adds a little color in the jar and it's not going to make a huge difference, but it just looks nice. Like here I've got echinacea. Most of the benefits are going to be found in the leaves, but the flower petals are good too. I don't get as many of those as I do leaves, but I like to throw the petals in there just because when it's sitting there in the jar, it just looks pretty. Nasturtium flowers. Now you would think these would be a lot more delicate than the some other things, but I find that they do take a little longer to dry. They definitely take longer to dry than the leaves themselves. So again, I just throw them on the tray. I will pile them just like that. Same thing with the nasturtium leaves. Here I've got nasturtium leaves. I will be doing a video on making a nasturtium leaf tincture down the road. So be watching for that coming out later. And if you're curious on what I use the tincture for, go ahead and check out my nasturtium video, the benefits of it, and that talks about how I use it. Right here I've got some spearmint, which is right here. And then this one here with the more wrinkly, the bigger and more wrinkly leaves is the Mojito Mint. Yes, it is a mint. I had somebody ask me that. Mojito Mint. It's the flavor is somewhat similar to spearmint, but I like it much better. I just don't really know how best to describe it. Somewhere between a peppermint and a spearmint, I guess, might be the closest thing I can get there. And then here are some Calendula flowers. I got a few pink ones in here, some orange and yellow. Now these ones I won't actually be dehydrating today. I'll be making vinegar and I'll be shooting a separate video just on that. But again, if I'm going to dehydrate them, I just spread them out and those will go on the top rack. And that's all I have here. Here are some already dehydrated herbs. I've got nasturtium leaves. I've got nasturtium flowers. That's what they look like when they're fully dry. Woolly lamb's ear leaves. The pansies. Pansies are very, very delicate. They dehydrate up quite quickly. And so you really want to keep an eye on these, and they'll get very small compared to the size they are when they go in there. And I already showed you the echinacea. Here are some calendula. I break them up. I used to put them in the jars whole, but now once the calendula is fully dry, and I dry the whole flower, just the flower, the leaves are not, you don't want to use the leaves, then I just break them up like this with my fingers and put them in there, because I want to make sure, because the problem I had with putting the whole flower in there, sometimes I found that the centers wouldn't get fully dry and I didn't realize it, and then it would cause the whole jar to spoil. So breaking them up until you know you get all the way through that center, that way you know it's fully dry. And if it's not fully dry, put the center back on the dehydrator. You want your herbs completely dry so that when you pick them up, when they're dry, and you start just pinching them like this, rubbing them between your fingers, they should just break up really easy. And then right here are marshmallow leaves, and with a little bit of flowers mixed in. You can kind of see the lighter color in there. That's the flowers. And again, mostly they don't have as many medicinal properties as the leaves or the root, but I throw them in there because it just makes it look prettier in the jar. Now, another common question I get about the herbs once I've harvested them is people ask me, do I wash them or do I rinse them at least? The answer is typically no on both. None of these have I rinsed. If you see any moisture on them, it's because we live in rain country and it's been raining a lot. We're into our rainy season now, which is 9 months out of the year. So, and so that's the moisture you see on here. Now, I do sometimes rinse my herbs depending on where they're harvested. Most of the time I will harvest them from places where I'm not concerned about the dog peeing on them. Like in the main garden bed, the dog can't get in there. He's hardly ever out front, so any of the front herbs, even then I know when he does go out front, I know where he pees. He pees on the ones closest to the edge of the bed and down low. He's a tiny little dog. So I usually will harvest the herbs from the back and just leave the ones in the front. But if I'm still questionable on maybe a neighbor dog came over and peed on my herbs or whatever, then I will rinse them and possibly even spray them down with some of my homemade vinegar just to kill any possible things that could be on there. Or if I'm more concerned about the herbs being maybe a little bit dusty, maybe I'll rinse them off, but that's rare around here. Dust is usually not a problem as far as the outside stuff. And depending on the dust, you know, dirt isn't all bad. We got this kind of fear of dirt, but dirt isn't all bad. In fact, there's a lot of good things in the dirt, just like gardening. I've talked about it before, getting your hands in the dirt. There's enzymes in that soil that when it gets into your skin, they release the endorphins, and that's why gardening makes you happy. And that's why you should also be gardening with your bare hands as much as you can, and even in your bare feet, because getting those enzymes into your skin is just really, really good for you. And it's a great way to relieve depression if you suffer from any kind of depression. Now, the electric dehydrator method I only use during the times of the year when we're still getting plenty of solar power that I can run my dehydrator most of the day. Now, as far as herbs go, because it's on such a low setting anyway, it really draws very little power out of our battery bank when running. But, you know, in the winter time, I'm not going to be using the electric dehydrator for anything, just because we try to really conserve that and use our wood stove as much as possible. On top of the fact that if I have a fire going, I'm going to be more apt to use that for cooking, dehydrating, and whatever than to put wear and tear on my hot plates or on my electric dehydrator. So the other way, I'm not going to pick this up, it's a little bit heavy, but Mr. Rain does have a video on how he made this. He made this out of old bed rails. And I have a couple of them actually. This one is the one that sits on top. I have them stacked, and they sit right next to my wood stove. And sometimes if I'm doing jerky, I will put this right on top of the wood stove, because jerky you want to dehydrate at a higher heat anyway. And then I constantly rotate the trays. Okay, But if I'm drying herbs and things like that, apples, vegetables, whatever, then I just leave it sitting beside the wood stove because there's enough warmth coming off there, enough airflow that everything dries pretty quickly there and without getting over hot. You don't want, especially your herbs, your delicate things, you don't want them to get too hot because you're going to kill all the good stuff in there. So herbs especially, I do not dry them on top of the wood stove because it just gets too hot up there. And for this dehydrator rack, we found these at our local store. They're kind of expensive, but I love how they're a nice fine mesh and they're all stainless steel. So $10 a piece for these. So if you're looking at buying or building your own rack, like Mr. Rain did in that video, I wish I could link these for you. I have yet to be able to find them anywhere online where I can link to them where you can purchase them. For some reason, we can only find them at our local store. And we have about 6 of these because I have a couple of, I'd like to get a couple more because I have 2 of these racks that I use. So that's what I do with the herbs during the times of the year that we have fires going. When my herbs are fully dry, like I said, I break them up with my fingers and I use this little bowl right here, and I typically don't even wash it out because I don't worry about it. If you're particular about not mixing any of your herbs together, then you may want to wash your bowl out in between. Same thing with the funnel. I just break them up into a bowl, and then once I got them all broke up the size I want, I use my canning funnel, I put it over my jar, and then just pour the herbs into the jar, and then I use the vacuum seal method with the brake bleeder to seal the jars up, and then I'll put them away in my pantry. Now I do have a video of 2 ways to vacuum seal into jars. My favorite way is the brake bleeder method. I'll go ahead and link to it right up here. And then also I have a video on how I store these in my pantry, and you can see that. I'll go ahead and link to that one up here as well. One more thing I want to mention before I go is there are other ways you can dehydrate your herbs. If you don't have a rack like this, if you don't have an electric dehydrator, or you're totally off grid, all you have to do, instead of stripping your herbs off of your stems and your calendula, leave it on the stems. Same thing with any of this stuff. I would leave some stems on your nasturtium leaves. Just pick them down low instead of just picking the leaf like I do. And then tie them up, and you can hang them anywhere you want. Now, Mr. Rain builds a pasta drying rack that can also double as an herb drying rack. And I'll put a picture of it right here to show how you can use it in that way. But simply, you just bunch your herbs together. Usually you want to put flower side down, stem side up. And then you just tie them and hang them up. And some people, I think Homestead Tessie does this one quite a bit, where she hangs them in quite a few different places. I don't know if she does it all over her house. I think she has a special room, her canning room, where she hangs most of her herbs. And a lot of people do it that way. It's an excellent way to do it if you have a dry enough climate in your house to do that, and fairly dust-free. It depends on how squeamish you are about getting dust on your herb, or spiders making webs on them and stuff, because it can take a while for them to dry that way. But it depends again on the herb how long it's actually going to take. Your calendula flowers are going to take you much longer than your nasturtium leaf. Okay, well, I hope that answers the questions that people had about how I dehydrate and preserve and save, and whether or not I wash my herbs. If you have any more questions, go ahead and put them below. That always gives me ideas for more videos that I can put out, or specific videos, so that I can always link people back to them if they have these questions in the future. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this video and you learned something new. Thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.